Hi everybody, and welcome to Dr. D's 5-minute lecture series. The first in the lecture series, I'm going to be talking about the philosophy of religion. So it'll be an intro to the philosophy of religion. So here I go, I'm going to start the timer. Clock will be ticking and I'll have 5 minutes. So, what is the philosophy of religion? Well, the philosophy of religion has a long history in the Western discourse on philosophy, going really all the way back at least to the time of Thomas Aquinas in the medieval period. And for a large part of the history of the philosophy of religion, the main issues or concerns have really been focused on Western theistic religious traditions. And what I mean by that are the three religions of the book, as they're often called: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Now, the other aspect of the traditional philosophy of religion is the focus on two things, really. First, proofs for God's existence, and then also philosophical problems related to a particular theistic concept of God. So it's a very standard in traditional philosophy of religion to begin discussions with what is known as the cosmological argument. Now, what is the cosmological argument? So, very briefly, the cosmological argument, or cosmological arguments, because there are more than one, are different ways of trying to prove the existence of God based on some type of evidence that we find in the cosmos. And so, for example, Aquinas offers us what he calls his four ways, based on motion, causality, contingency, and this idea of maximum exemplar. Now, just to take a very simple example, looking at Aquinas' second way concerning causality. And now he provides a very simple proof, which says every effect has a cause, number one. Infinite regress is impossible, number two. And therefore, number three, there must be a first cause. And once he establishes there must be a first cause, he then goes on to argue that God is the first cause. So that's a very straightforward example of the cosmological argument, which obviously needs some unpacking, which I will do probably in a future video. Other really important arguments in the philosophy of religion is called the Ontological Argument, that attempts to prove that God logically must exist without recourse to experience, so it's known as an a priori argument. And a very famous one, example of the ontological argument, is Anselm's ontological argument. Now, a very popular argument for God's existence, and one that's sort of been resurrected in the contemporary arena, is known as the design argument, which basically argues from analogy to objects that we see in the world. For example, looking at the complexity of a watch or a human eye, for example, and then says, well, because something's as complex as a watch needs a designer, and we look at the complexity in the world, therefore the world needs a designer. And this argument has been updated more recently in what is known as the fine-tuning argument. Now, on the flip side of the traditional philosophy of religion are arguments against God's existence. And one of the big ones here is the problem of evil. This, for example, states that given all the evil that does exist in the world, how can there be an all-good, all-powerful, all-knowing creator God that allowed for such a world to exist? So that's very simply the problem of evil. Other arguments, example, are the argument of foreknowledge and free will, which says that if God knows everything, for all time, how is it possible for us to have free will, since God already knows what we're going to do before we do it? So these are the kind of the issues that are looked at in the traditional philosophy of religion. But since then, the study of religion has expanded to also include Asian religions, and that's what I'm going to talk about in my next video. So hope to see you again soon. This is Dr. D signing off.